let's get started. Lexi, I mean, everyone probably knows that you're in the Flinn class of 2015. That's right, right?
Correct.
Um, I'd like you to start in the beginning and just take us through a little bit of that experience, where you went to high school, what college you went to, university you went to, and why.
Mhm.
What stands out about your time as a scholar?
Yeah, definitely. So I graduated from Westwood High School in Mesa in 2015, which feels like forever ago. I cannot believe it's been over 10 years. Um, and I decided to go to ASU for a variety of reasons. I think that the biggest one, though, was the flexibility that was kind of offered to me to just like have this like not and no shade of course to like U of A or NAU, but just to have this kind of
Of
like
course. Yeah. As an ASU person, yeah.
but just to kind of have this like big like just like diverse kind of ability to explore a lot of different things because as we'll kind of find out throughout this talk, I didn't really know what the heck I was doing. And I definitely felt that like ASU would be like a safe place for me to kind of explore my options, and it helped that it was kind of close to home. And I think that, I mean, there's so many things that I take away from my scholars experience, but the kind of like the biggest is something that I see now a lot in my career is the value of the network. Um, and really kind of like you just kind of have this built-in safety net that like if you're floundering or you're like, I think I want to be a consultant, or I think I want to go to law school, or I think that I want to do this or that. Like you probably have a pretty good statistical likelihood that somebody in our network has done or is doing that very thing. And I think just having that and leveraging that and like just taking full advantage of it is something that I have unapologetically done myself. And I encourage everybody to do as well.
We definitely are going to tap into that a little bit, but I think like this is true both for professional stuff and personal stuff, whether it's hobbies, whether it's religious issues. I mean,
Yeah.
I've come across many different varieties of connections that people have made in the Flinn network. So we're definitely going to delve into that, but it's good to hear you remind everybody on this call to tap in. Now your undergraduate major was a little unique because if you told me I actually hadn't met anybody who'd done that route, like the 3-in-1 or what 2-in-1 thing. Could you
Mhm.
explain that to everyone what you started off doing?
Yes. So as I kind of meandered my way through the first year or two. I switched my major probably, I think, literally 8 times. I went everywhere I started as biochemistry. I moved over to like business law at some point. I was an astrobiology major for a while. And then I settled on biology and society ultimately. And biology and society is essentially kind of exploring this intersection of how science relates with like people, with ethics and bioethics, for example, with policy across health, and how we can kind of encourage like proper scientific discourse among like the lay people, and just be better scientific citizens. um, and so I did a 4+1 program in biology and society. I essentially started working on my master's degree my senior year, and I defended my master's the summer of COVID. So that would have been 2020. And then I looped straight into a PhD program in the same thing. And I always say, for any of the ASU folks on the call, um, Michael Crow, I took a class with him. I highly recommend you take a class with him if you can. Um, and he says that getting 3 degrees at ASU is getting your pitchfork. So, so I was on track to get my pitchfork.
And we have let's go straight into that topic.
Yes.
So for me, when I went to a PhD program, it was a similar story that you told me, but the version was like I knew I wasn't done learning
Mm.
economics and I was really into it. I knew that most people who got a PhD in economics would go on to teaching. And even though I didn't plan on teaching, I was like, I just blindly went straight in and jumped right into it. For you, you told a similar story, but take us through why you decided to do a PhD.
Yes. So I will say I'm a very transparent person, and my main reason that I decided to loop into the PhD is because I didn't know what else to do. I felt like a terminal degree, meaning like a PhD or an MD or whatever. I felt that a terminal degree was kind of like the pinnacle of what I was seeking after. And I was kind of going through this crisis where I was like, I thought I wanted to be a doctor for a really long time. And I thought, I was like, well, maybe research is the right way to kind of like position myself as like a better doctor candidate. And I loved biology and society, I still do. But I definitely was just meandering, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it. Um, and I kind of acknowledged that my I had a lot of finite resources kind of happening all at once. Like I was first of all, I was experiencing a very severe burnout, having kind of just powered through high school, undergrad, and master's, and then working my way through this PhD program. And just very transparently was completely burnt out, had lost all of my passion. Um, and I realized that these finite resources, meaning, my mental health, my 20s, and my curiosity in general, those were all finite. And I wanted to make sure that I did everything to protect what I had, and ultimately made the decision to part ways with the program after, I mean, it was like my fourth semester, I think. Yeah, that was a very, very hard decision, though. And
Let's break that down to two little parts. So first of all, you were really thought you're going to be in medicine, and a lot of people in the Flinn Scholar community goes into medicine, and it's a natural thing. There's almost like a herd feeling.
Mhm.
It's a very fun and interesting intellectual career. What happened? Was there any one point or events or series of events that made you go, maybe medicine isn't for me? I ask this because there might be other people on the call or who listen to this who are trying to evaluate just generally is something that they thought they're passionate about it maybe isn't
Yes.
for them.
Yes. There definitely was kind of a moment where I was like, I don't know that this is right for me anymore. First of all, I don't really thrive in an environment that is, um, and I don't say this to like, I hope that this doesn't come across that I'm like talking down on anything at all, but I was not finding myself thriving in the like more cutthroat environment that was required to get admitted somewhere,
Mm.
essentially. Not that medicine is cutthroat, but just the whole admissions process is so corrupt at this point, for lack of a way,
Competitive.
in my opinion, in my humble opinion. And I think that I realized that in tandem with the fact that I spent some time volunteering at a clinic for the homeless in downtown Phoenix for a while. And I found that really rewarding. At the same time, I realized that patient care was not going to be novel enough for me, probably. And obviously, there are a lot of ways to circumnavigate that, by going into different specialties or whatever. But my vision of what medicine looked like was patient care, even though there are a lot of different ways to utilize a medical degree. Um, and so I just kind of was like, wipe my hands of that. And I was like, okay, I don't think that I'm cut out for this. And I tested on law school for a little while. The astrobiology major, I was like, oh, I'm going to be a rocket scientist. And then I realized that I hate physics. Um, so yeah, it was a big exploration journey.
And ultimately, hopefully you're not my dogs or going through pain.
No, you're fine.
Um, so in a PhD program, it's really most PhD programs are very intense for the
Mhm.
first few years. And in economics, there's this concept of sunk costs. In reality, from a pure theoretic perspective, you already spent the time, you probably spent the money, or you already signed the loans. So it's in the past, and you should treat every day as a blank slate in terms of making a decision. Like
Mhm.
that said, in reality, it's very hard after you've invested time and money into something to actually do a discrete change. Like
Yeah.
for people, and whether you're further on in your career, because I want to talk, because you have a lot of expertise on the career side, we're going to get into in a minute, but whether you're a scholar right now who may haven't even come to that point, like, oh, I've already spent 3 years in this major, and now I'm going to change, or a PhD program, or even in their career, what do you think gave you the permission to accept that sunk cost and go forward? Or do you have any tidbits on like how do you look at that from a practical, personable view, not just a theoretical economics view?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, well, like as a fun little aside, I picked up poker as a hobby around this time. So the whole like sunk costs thing, like I was very present in my mind at the time. So it's funny that you mentioned that because
Ah.
it was definitely a consideration. But I think that I realized that I was 24 or 25 years old or 24. And I was like, all I've ever done is school. Like, all I've ever done is try to prepare myself for the next step, prepare myself for, admissions to this program, or, I wanted to reach some sort of like obscure, like pinnacle thing that I felt like was going to be key to my actualization as a human being.
I made
Uh,
it, the stake in the
yeah,
sand.
exactly.
Mhm.
And I realized that like that was really not self-serving for me. It was really like what can I do to either satisfy other people's visions of what my future might look like, like whoever that might be. Um, and at the same time, like I also realized like the PhD is not going anywhere. Like I am a capable person. I can get back into a PhD program if I decide later on that I want to explore that fully. Um, I think that I just was like one day I woke up, I had spent the night before like just trudging through this text. I remember it was just like the most dull
Torture.
information. And I was just like, I realized truly that I'd lost the passion. And um, I was just like, I'm
You're
done.
ready. Mhm.
Yeah, I'm like, maybe this makes me a quitter, but like, I don't think so. Like, spoiler alert, like, I don't think that in retrospect, but I had to kind of accept that, like, my vision for my future was going to look a lot different than I had spent the previous 8 years essentially preparing for. And I had to be okay with that. And again, spoiler alert, I was.
And that's the thing, while you're in it, I had this analogy for myself at one point where like you're in this room, this mental room in your house, and you
Mhm.
think, it's got windows and it has doors, but somehow you think the door is one way into the room. But you have to realize like there are other doors and the
Yeah.
other rooms could look totally different. And if you
Yes.
don't leave the room, you won't know. And you could end up decorating that room really great, but maybe
Mhm.
there's a better room. And so I think that's what I tell my kids as well. Is like, you have the old shut the door behind you so you can go to the next one.
Exactly.
And you definitely exemplified that. So let's take the leap to like executive search. I mean, it isn't a career that most people know exists.
Hmm.
And usually not till later in their life because to be on the roster on of executive search, you tend to be further in your career. Can you
Right.
explain, you know, what you do specifically now in executive search and how you ended up here? Because I think make sure you talk about, the salary that you wanted that you didn't get, because that story is a good one.
Yes, I will. Yeah, so executive search, I mean, again, like you said, I had no idea this was a career. Nobody wakes up in second grade and goes to career day and is like, I'm going to be a recruiter for executives. And like you said, like most people don't know that there is this whole kind of consulting undercurrent that is executive search until they kind of get roped into an executive search process. And essentially, what it is in a nutshell is high level matchmaking for priority kind of roles within companies. And so clients will retain us on kind of a project basis. And we get search mandates. It's kind of like the fancy jargon for just like assignments. Um, and our whole kind of mandate is to go out, identify individuals who would be potentially good fits for this role, um, recruit them. In a lot of cases, the last, the last 5 or 6 years that I've been in this industry has been a very I would say client-driven market in the sense that there are more candidates than there are opportunities for certain roles. So the recruiting part is not necessarily the most challenging part because most often, people are kind of curious at least about what is out there. And I could kind of get into this whole long rant about, I won't, but this whole long rant about like loyalty and like how that is changing kind of with the incoming like um, younger,
Generation.
yeah,
Hmm.
younger generations, and how that differs extremely from like the retiring generations now. Um, and so I cannot give one a playbook on how to have the perfect career fall into your lap because just transparently, that is what happened to me. I had my LinkedIn kind of up to date with like some internships that I had done and just had like positioned myself as like a candidate that could have a lot of like malleable applications and different careers. I had no idea what I was going to do. My best guess was that I was going to go work for my dad for a little bit while I figured things out. But I had a recruiter kind of serendipitously reach out to me. And he said that he was looking for an extrovert who had scientific acumen and who would be wanting to build something from the ground up in terms of like a clinical lab science recruiting vertical within this like recruiting agency in Scottsdale. And so I I remember that one of the first questions that they asked me in the recruiting process was, what are your values? Like, what do you value? What is going to kind of like make you jump out of bed in the morning and go to work and love it? And I had never thought of that before. No one had ever asked me what my values are. And I kind of stumbled my way through that question very much the way that I stumbled through a question during my finalist Flinn interview with Ed Pastor, just like smiling graciously at me. Just love him. Rest in peace. And um, and I just I kind of stumbled my way through that and I realized that I had no idea what I was valuing. I had no idea what I wanted. And I was being offered kind of this opportunity to combine um, kind of my extroversion, my natural extroversion, with science. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. So I did. I did end up joining. And I've kind of made my way through a couple of companies now. Just the salary, the salary conversation. Um, It's a funny one. I remember
This was your first job,
this
right?
is my first job,
Okay.
yes. And I'll be honest, I was very undercompensated during at this job. And I remember I had my yearly review in January of like 2022, I think. And I told my boss, I was like, she's like, so what are your goals for this year? And I was like, I really want to make $100,000. And she's like, that is not going to happen. And it just so happened that I was getting kind of wined and dined by the largest executive search firm in the country, or in the world, actually. And I made it happen at 25 years of age. I was very proud of that. And it was one of those moments where I was kind of like, you know, who who is anyone else to tell me what I can and can't do? Like it was another one of those like wake up calls where I was like, this place is holding me back. They're literally keeping me down. And there is just this whole wide world out there that like is waiting to be discovered. And like nope, nobody can stop me. So
And I
it
think
was just
that lesson is so important for every single person on this call, and we all need to be reminded of it. But the
mhm,
second little hidden lesson is if you ever have somebody reporting to you, this is a no-no. You don't tell that person they are at a dead end at your job and they are never going to achieve what they want. I mean,
exactly.
even if it's technically true, you can at least try to work with the person to get to that goal. So I just think
Yes.
that, we're all employees, but we all can be bosses. So I think that's it. Because guess what? They lost you and you end up in a very cool firm. So take
Yeah.
us through the latest transition.
Yeah, so I spent about 2.5 years at a boutique executive search firm specialized in the life sciences. So, pharma, biotech, medtech, diagnostics, all of that good stuff. Recruiting everything from CEOs to chief medical officers. I was doing a lot of commercial roles. And it was a lean and mean machine, and it was so much fun. I was part of a really kind of like we called ourselves the SEAL team. Like we were just like very very kind of boots on the ground in the trenches, just everybody all hands on deck to use all of the the tropes. And I unfortunately that business kind of went wound down to a degree. And I was recruited to join another one of the top five executive search firms, which is based in Switzerland, and have joined it. I've taken a bit of a step back in terms of um, my purview, whereas before I was running search execution from start to finish, everything from crafting the outreach, identifying the candidates, to interviewing them, negotiating with them, and closing. And now I'm kind of more in a research oriented role, where a lot of my work, day to day work, is on candidate identification, and kind of like supporting. Just it's the way that this firm works is a little different, but it's been a really good experience, and um, I think one thing that you said, there's this like little like tidbit of knowledge that I have, that something that you said, Sarah, made me think of this, is if I could tell anyone anything, that like if you're in a position where you're going to be interviewing for a job, or you haven't interviewed in a long time, and um, I think one thing that we don't think about enough is how we feel after the interview. Like, sure, we can spend all the time in the world preparing, and trying to put your best foot forward, and be genuine and be kind of, represent who you are and what you bring to the table, of course. At the same time, what we don't think about enough is how do we feel after the interview? Like, if you get off the call and you're just like, ugh, like, oh my God, like, I can breathe, like, that was like exhausting, then more often than not, your experience in that role day to day, you are going to be feeling that way, as long as everyone's being genuine and forthcoming, kind of on the opposite end of the table. But if you're energized and you're like, wow, that was really exciting, like I could really see myself like thriving here. And just like you feel that like little like dopamine hit. It's kind of one of those things that more often than not, of course there are exceptions, but more often than not, you're going to feel that way in the job itself. So I think like listen to that little intuition that is like telling you like
I think that's
good.
such good advice. I've just gone through like 4 interviews in the last 20 years in my head. And like literally during that moment, even if you really want the job and you've gone
Mhm.
into it thinking, I really want this job, your rapport with that person, like if you, when I've walked out going, oh, I can't wait to talk to them again. Oh, I have these other questions I want to ask. Oh, that was fun on this. It's a total different thing than like, oh my God, that person was really annoying. I hope he's not indicative of the firm or
Yeah,
she's really X and is that what the way everybody else is, So I
exactly.
think that's really good advice. And actually, one thing I forgot to ask you, which I thought was quite interesting, I think a lot of Flynn people will be interested in, is when you interviewed for Corn Ferry, I think it was Corn Ferry, you said
Mhm.
that the recruiter or whoever it was said she only hires from top 20 schools, or the person
Yes.
did. Given that we've heard this before, and some people when they're taking the Flynn, they're like, oh, if don't have Harvard on my resume, will I still be able to do X? Can you tell
Mhm.
us how you navigated that? Because clearly you got the job anyways.
Yes, I did get the job. And I remember like she alluded to it once or twice where she was like, oh, like you went to Arizona State University, like, what did you learn there? And I was like, hold up, like I loved my experience at ASU. But at the same time, I was like, I ultimately made the decision to go there in large part due to a scholarship that I received. And, I think like talking to people like that, that do value kind of like the elite status of certain universities. I think it's first off, I think it's an antiquated way of kind of like a remnant of the consulting industry in particular. And I do see it phasing out. I did do some internal talent acquisition at Korn Ferry, and I fought really hard for some of my candidates who didn't come from, these like marquee schools. And I was hoping that I was disrupting the status quo a little bit at least. But I mentioned to her, I went to ASU as a result of this the scholarship that I got, and I got to talk all about Flynn. And I just remember like her eyebrows raised, and she's like, "Huh." And literally, I got my offer like the next day. So I was like,
Yeah.
right? I was like, it's the one thing that I kind of put her over the edge. I didn't like oversell anything. It was just like very transparent, but it was enough to assuage her, what she
Worries and
was looking
fears.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, so I've got a whole host of practical advice questions.
Yes.
And then we'll get back to some like personal stuff on you. But from your recruiting experience, what actually makes someone stand out these days when they're trying to get a job? Because like you said, it's a buyer's market from the company perspective right now.
Mhm.
And especially I keep hearing about the saturation. We in our company, same thing is like the saturation in AI driven resumes and AI screening. So what should job seekers be adapting with in order to try to connect to a real person?
Yes. So first off, I think the thing that sets so there's in my experience, what sets like to speak to both sides of the house, the current scholars and alumni scholars in this talk right now. For an executive, the thing that differentiates a resume, in my opinion, and obviously your resume is your first impression, so you want to communicate it the best you can. But the biggest thing that differentiates to me that somebody has actually been there, done that from an executive standpoint is their resume is less about them and more about the people that they have helped and served and mentored and supported and managed and led and all of those, verbs. I think like they're as probably every website says, you want to lead with kind of your impact. It's better to say, you know, improved productivity by 30% as measured by blah, blah, blah. And, there's 125% uptick in compensation. I don't know. Just like
Uh-huh.
using numbers
Data. Uh-huh.
that speaks to a recruiter's mind in my experience, because it shows that you have transferable, actionable skills that have actually been actualized in some sort of setting. The other thing that I don't know if this is like a hot take, but um, it's also probably a bit biased by my own experience, but the linear path is so out. Like, I mean, if somebody, has known from day one that they want to be in, you know, patient care, just to go back to that example, and they find extreme, just like satisfaction in, that, that is fantastic for them. At the same time, if somebody went to medical school, got their MD, did their residency, and then they were like, oh crap, like I'm kind of stuck. It's like, no, you're not. Like there is so much you can do with an MD or a PhD. A lot of times you don't even need a terminal degree to really become successful. For the current scholars that are listening, I think my best advice is to ask yourself why you are doing, your next step. Like, is it because you don't know what else to do like I did? Like, if you can be honest with yourself about that and like you're okay with the potential consequences, then more power to you. But I think aligning your next steps with your values and like in my case, my values were achievement drive, strategic kind of like problem solving, um, um, creativity, and I'm forgetting one other one, but I found all of those in my career, and I love doing what I do, and I hope that for everybody. I hope that everybody finds their thing that gets them out of bed in the morning and makes them happy to go do their job every day.
You mentioned value as a or achievement as a value. And
Mhm.
I know you mentioned, and I thought it was a great way to say over-indexing on achievement. And I'm guessing there might be a few people in the audience who have
Yes.
that characteristic. Can you go into that a little bit more and what does that mean to you? And how do you realize, or how did you realize that you needed to rebalance? Like, were there, you mentioned your mental health issues, but any other things that you can say, like, as a reality check, like, maybe this isn't serving me?
Yeah, there's an interesting point that I wrote down that I just want to basically like I had kind of fallen into the trope of the gifted kid archetype. And I was like, okay, what's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? And I realized that I wasn't doing it for my own best interests. I think like it's easy when you're young to like not think about like work-life balance when you get older and have kids and just like what sort of career is going to lend itself to the life that you see outside of work because I think it's easy to like make work your identity. And I am a very, very staunch proponent of not doing that. Work should never be your identity. And I think like finding a career that enables, because at the end of the day, we all have to, I mean, not all of us, I guess, but most of us have to work for better or for worse. And I think like finding something that's meaningful to an extent, but doesn't become saturated with your whole life is something that we don't think about enough as we're kind of, 18 years old and prefrontal cortex is so underdeveloped and they're expecting us to make all these big decisions about our lives and it's kind of just like you're like who invented this system but it's one thing that like I can reflect back on and see as kind of being um, a thing. And I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question
No,
directly.
it's actually leads it's the same topic, but like this is the idea of values. I agree. Like you're so just whether it's the state of development of your brain, where you are in your life cycle, whatever, most people don't think about their value system
Yes.
sometimes ever in their whole life.
Yep.
But to be to feel fulfilled, I'm also of the same mindset that if you can get in touch with what your values are and then actively assess when you're aligned with them, that's a good thing. Do you
Mhm.
have, since you've spent a lot of time, you mentioned often, do you have like a go-to place or like how do people identify their values and then how would you translate that to seeing if it's aligned with your career and your work? It might be
Yeah.
an hour-long answer, so we'll have to keep it a couple minutes,
No
but we can
worries.
follow up because I have some more questions. But anyway,
Yes.
I think it's an important one.
Well, there are two. I'm pretty sure the last I checked, were both free resources. One is called the VIA Institute of Character Strengths Assessment.
Everybody writing this down? Just checking. Okay.
It's VIA, V is in Victor. And the other one is called the Life Values Inventory. Those are both free and are like, don't quote me on that. I'm like 95% sure. They were at least, a year or two ago, when I last checked. But um, those are really, it's just like if you just have an evening to yourself and you're like, you want to sit down and just do some self-exploration and like really kind of like I am not a proponent of the 5-year plan or the 10-year plan. I think that all that stuff is um, there's just too many variables to really like stick to a plan in my experience and the experience of a lot of the folks that I've come to know in my career. Um, I think you just, and maybe like if you're in therapy, which I'm also a very strong proponent of, talk with your therapist about, your values, use them as like a little mini life coach for a session or two. And just really kind of explore what is meaningful to you. Like, I think like at this point in my life, it's like one of the big questions I have is like, if slash when I want to start a family and like if you had told me 10 years ago that I would be thinking this way, I'd be like, I don't know about that. So like things change and people's perspectives change. And um, I think that, kind of checking in with yourself every year or two on what you value and how those values are changing. And like my achievement value when I was in college was, again, it was going after that pinnacle thing that I felt was going to contribute to my actualization as a human. Um, Now my achievement drive is more like, how can I better understand myself? How can I kind of like, get to the next phase in my career, of course, but at the same time, like, how can I help other people along the way? How can I mentor others? And like, you know, I don't have like an end goal right now, which I have come to be okay with. And I encourage others to just be okay with kind of that, like, that absence of plan.
Mhm. It's
And
very tricky. It's a
it's
very
scary.
scary place to be to let go of like, I mean, I had a therapist once and actually he's super well known. I just got 1 hour with him. His name is Bruce Tift. I highly recommend checking out his book called Already Free or something like that. So he's a Buddhist slash Western psychotherapist. And he said to me, he's like, do you know when, or would you argue that breathing is the most important thing in being alive? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, do you know when your last breath is going to be? And I'm like, no. And he made me say different statements, which really reflected that I have no control. And I couldn't necessarily, I could make all the plans I wanted for 1, 3, 5 years from now.
Yep.
A bunch of crap, right? There's just no way it's going to work. You can make general ideas. But I think, sitting in that uncertainty is a really awesome practice for everybody. I'm just going to throw that out
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
One last thing I want to bring up, because you mentioned you're okay with it, because I'm a very strong advocate of mental health and being vocal about mental health and seeking support for mental health.
Yes.
So if someone's might be listening who might be struggling quietly, I have no idea. But I just think, what do you wish someone would have told you earlier, given you experienced some mental health challenges and you've been open to talking about that publicly?
Yeah. I mean, like, that's a really good question. I think what I wish I had known differs at different stages. But like as I started college and like through my first 2 years, I think that I was just so heads down and so oblivious to kind of like the toll I was putting on myself by just like constantly, like having spent all of high school and all of, my 2 years of undergrad at the time, um, like just completely devoting myself to the next thing. And I didn't really know who I was in those moments that, and what I wanted. And I wish that someone had told me that it was okay to like slow down. Um, I think that we're all capable and resilient and perseverant people. We wouldn't be here if we weren't. And, you know, not to be like toxic positivity, but like we're all gonna figure it out. Like no one here is going to like sure you might make mistakes. I have made a lot. And like personally and professionally. And I think that you have to like accept those mistakes and really kind of just decide how you're going to learn from them and move forward. Because like I've made some big mistakes, and I just you can't. I mean, it's so much easier said than done. I'm the queen of rumination, but ruminating is like one of those things that I think contributes to burnout. And you just constantly check in with yourself. Like if you're not in therapy, which I mean, I very much so encourage everybody to be in therapy, at least spend a few years of your life in therapy. But check in with yourself regularly. Like just be like, how am I doing? Like, am I eating? Am I taking care of myself? And monitor those like little red flags, because it can sneak up on you. You may not realize that you're kind of spiraling until it's too late. And do that for your friends too, I would say. That's um, one thing that like I spend a lot of this time isolating myself from others, simply because I was just way too goal oriented at the time. And I don't think that I had really spent the time to nurture that support system to help, keep an eye on me as much as I would for them. And um, I think that is one of like my bigger regrets from undergrad, but, working on it now in my later adulthood.
Better late than never.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like I think it's like we know if we see our hand bleeding, it's we're like,
Mhm.
oh, I gotta go to the doctor right now. It's not stopping bleeding, but you don't notice, and it's hard to judge yourself if you're what mental state you're on because you only know your own brain and how it thinks. You don't
Right.
have the experience of jumping in someone else's and go, wow, they don't think nonstop in the middle of the night, and I do. Maybe I should talk to somebody about that.
Yeah.
So, and that's true of medicines as well. Like I'm a big advocate, and just throwing this out there, like just like no one judges you for taking high cholesterol meds because
Mhm.
guess what? It keeps you alive,
Yeah.
keeps the sclerosis from happening. But,
Yeah.
and I think there's finally less stigma associated with mental health medicine too. So I just love any chance to bring this up. So thank you
Yes.
for
Yeah, of
offering that.
course. Of
Okay,
course.
so I have like literally 30 more questions, but I promise other people can ask and we can always come back. We haven't hit on chess topics, for example. She threw poker out there,
Yes.
all sorts of things, but especially, we have an expert here on stuff to do with career decision and values. So I want to give anyone the opportunity. Please raise your hand, type in the chat, go for it.
Great question, Gayatri. Um, I think the thing that I love the most about my day to day is connecting with people. I think one of the things that I've learned by connecting with these like super accomplished, um, incredible, smart people that are just like out there kicking butt and, like one day I could be talking to like the innovator of some obscure medication that, in 5 years may be like the treatment for some rare type of cancer. And just like the passion that people have is so just like exhilarating to like hear and translate over to my clients. I think like connecting with people is just like it's truly the joy of this job. It's learning about what makes other people tick, and it is also realizing that nobody has anything figured out. Like even these people that are sitting as CEOs of, you know, if you like look in your medicine cabinet and you see the pharma company on your medicine bottle, the CEO of that company, may talk some big game on their like board briefings and whatnot, but they probably feel like they have not figured it out. And I don't think anybody has. I don't think anybody ever will fully actualize. I think Maslow was a liar. And um, and I think that it's funny seeing people that I grew up with become physicians and being like, wait a second, like doctors are fallible. I think like I spent a long time like in my adolescence just thinking that doctors are like this infallible like deity and like they're not. And learning that was kind of like one of those like, huh, like I went to Mill Avenue with that person and now they're taking care of pediatric cancer patients.
Uh-huh. That's wild. That and
Yeah.
watch a few episodes of The Pit, and that'll get rid of that thought
Yeah,
too.
okay,
Wait,
that's
wait,
fair.
wait, wait. Okay, so we have another question from Ariana. Out of curiosity, what qualities do you look for when hiring a future CEO?
Um, I think so. That's a good question. Um, a CEO is kind of like one of these weird phenotypes where most often they need to have this like commercial acumen. So like somebody who knows, they call it a P&L, which I think is like profit and loss. I'm pretty sure that's what it, but it's
Yep.
like a thing that you carry, like a bag, like you carry a bag is what we say. And you're responsible for um, like some sort of revenue generation component of your company. I think somebody having that commercial acumen, as well as very importantly, the strategic and operational mindset of like, how can I, you know, take this company to the next level? They have to be very visionary. They have to be very well spoken and inspiring and all of those good things. And it's a really dynamic type of person. It is not for everybody. And we see that often, when smaller companies fail because they've made the wrong decision to put somebody in who does not kind of meet all of those criteria. So yeah, that's my little jargony jargony pitch there.
That's fair. And I honestly like my experience, the CEOs in a bigger firm don't have to be the super product experts. They have to be able to lead and champion people. So it's
Yes.
like sales quality in a way, like be
Yeah.
very extroverted.
Yeah.
Okay, we got a couple more questions. Okay, Mia, you talked about thinking about how interviews make us feel as the interviewee, but as an interviewer, what makes the interview feel inspiring and energizing to you? P.S. You're amazing, Lexi. Just want to throw that
Thank you. You're also amazing, Mia. And I think as an interviewer, I come away from an interview most inspired when somebody is genuine and can express eloquently and kind of succinctly, can express um, what they do and the impact that they make in a way that is, um, you know, makes my life a little easier, makes it so that I can pitch them to my clients on one hand, but also um, it's like asking somebody who's in a PhD program what their research is about. You can like never get them to stop talking about it if they're really passionate about it. And that is actually kind of like what I look for. At the same time, of course, I would offer the advice like never monologue. And if you find yourself talking for 3 minutes or 4 minutes straight, take a deep breath,
yourself.
ask a question to engage your interviewer, and kind of reset, but kind of like conveying that passion is something that I think is just so like it's simple but and it's obvious but like it's hard to do in practice without like I don't know. Like it's very motivating and energizing to the interviewer to hear that passion and like be able to translate that to the client and kind of put the puzzle pieces together in how um, like how can this person really fit in and make an impact is that's what I do at the end of the day.
And of the zillion interviews I've done, I really like it when the person comes prepared with questions and has done some research beforehand. So it makes it sound like, I mean, chances that hopefully they're not faking that they want it, but like that they truly were interested enough. Like there is so much information out there, especially anywhere on the internet. You can find people on LinkedIn that work there. You can find connections that work there. Like come with the list of those questions, and hopefully you get a lot of time to ask.
Yes.
Um, Okay, we have Claire. What is some advice on getting through in between stages in your career? I know I want to do something different than what I'm currently doing, but also know that this time is valuable for learning and financial stability. How to go about enjoying and learning in the now while looking ahead to something different. And this can be the case also, people further in their career when you're tied to a mortgage and all that kind of stuff. Do you have any advice on like how to plan for something new while doing what you have to do now?
Yes. Yeah, my biggest advice is to again, I mean, like network with people who maybe you do know, you don't know. I think a lot of people who are like in an individual contributor type role are more likely to do something called like an informational interview. You may not know this person, or you may have, several degrees of separation from this person, but if you find somebody who's doing something that you're interested in, want to learn a little bit more, just like shoot your shot and reach out to them and be like, "Hey, can I like have 20 minutes of your time just to like you're really inspiring. What you're doing is really fascinating to me because of XYZ. Can I have 20 minutes of your time? If they're in person, buy them a coffee. If not, just like be really grateful." And I think that you'd be surprised how often people are willing to, talk about what energizes them, and what they do. And, if somebody is not happy in their role, they're probably going to share with you why they aren't happy, which is also very good information to have as you're kind of assessing what next step you're going to take. Um, I think like upskilling, if, you happen to be in like STEM, upskilling across how can you better integrate your use of AI into your workflows, as that kind of becomes like the hot topic right now. Kind of doing what you can there, I think is great. And I think like just knowing that you're never stuck and you can always make a pivot. I have seen it so many times. I think at the end of the day, you just have to remind yourself that you are resilient, and there's a whole wide world out there, like I said earlier. And I think like spending the last 5 or 6 years in this industry has taught me a lot about the talent ecosystem and how everything kind of works together. And you'd be surprised at how many jobs exist. Like, you're like, huh, you can get paid to do that. Like, that sounds fun. So just like explore, like spend your evenings, like, devote, don't like go overboard and spend, hyper focus on it. Allocate like an hour every day or two, to exploring, applying to jobs, talking to people. And don't burn yourself out on this because I think that that's something that we can do too.
Yeah, especially, I mean, I think like networking from the position, to me, networking is the number one thing everyone should do at all times, even if they're happy with their job. It is besides, practice and you get to connect with people, which usually ends up helping your community. It really lays the ground for work for when you need something.
Mhm.
And, just to wrap up, you mentioned that you are a shameless networker of the Flinn community. So I would love to like end the session with you telling us how we all, in what ways you think we should be using the Flinn community, either from your personal examples or, from what you know about the alumni versus the scholars, what can we do? Because most people probably aren't taking advantage of it.
Yes. Yeah. I think if you don't have a LinkedIn, no matter how old you are or what stage of career you're at, you need a LinkedIn, for better or for worse. And once you do have that LinkedIn and you kind of learn how to, you know, differentiate yourself on that with keywords and whatnot, I think you need to go through the Flinn page, and just look at all of the different career titles that the Flinn community has. Um, if something kind of particularly sticks out to you, definitely like kind of like see what their flow has been to get to where they're at. And of course, reach out to them. I know a lot of people are busy, and they may or may not respond right away, given how infrequently some people check LinkedIn. But there's also like opportunities to like email. I think that the Scholars Directory has emails for some people that opt into that, if I remember correctly. And I mean, I know that personally, I am putting this offer out to whomever, to, if there are any other questions that, or if I can ever be of any help with, like, I obviously want to put like a polite boundary in place to an extent, but like, um, I would love to help, like, with, kind of figuring out paths. And one of my big passions that I learned at Corn Ferry was the early careers, um, side of things as well. So it's not just like the executive stuff. I love like, like helping people break into industries and, however I can be of help with that is the offers on the table always.
That is freaking awesome, and everyone listening should take advantage of that within the polite boundaries. We all need to have boundaries. That's a whole nother topic.
Yes.
But thank you so much, Lexi, for spending your time with us, and it was just really fun to talk to you and get to know you.